But yeah, he mentions positioning, and unfortunately, this is a good example of, how you don't want to position. All right, what's going on, boys? It's your boy Syztem with over 7,000 hours of in-game Genshin Impact experience, and today we're doing a reaction video to somebody else's Genshin Impact video. As always, there'll be an educational resource for you to get better at your team building and just in general playing Genshin Impact. We'll be using this video for some analysis of teams and just general game knowledge. The video that we'll be looking at today is PokemonChallenges' first Genshin Impact video called Finding My Favorite Pokemon in Genshin Impact. Chad, I'm gonna have to leave you off screen for this one because you were acting up. Might put you back there later if you're being Have. So PokemonChallenges makes a lot of videos around Nuzlocking content, just mainly about Pokemon. And the same way that kind of Nuzlocke is a way to make the, the kids game of Pokemon into a challenge that can make adults struggle for like months on end. I've been looking for similar challenges, even, trying to adapt maybe the Nuzlocke format into something that Genshin can use. Still all a work in progress, but hey, drop anything in the comments or any ideas for what I can do for that. And yes, before you ask, I am indeed a Pokemon. I'm mixed between a Geodude and a Ditto. I used to, back in the old days, I used to stream like Nuzlocks and challenge runs on Twitch, but those days are, those are in the past. The video that we have on tap today is a sponsored video, sponsored by Genshin Impact. Jan doesn't usually make videos around this game, so let's all be nice in the comments, give him a warm welcome to the wonderful world of online Genshin Impact content. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into it.
So, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really into Pokemon. So into Pokemon, in fact, that when Genshin Impact approached me to try their game, my first question was, how can I relate this back to Nuzlocking? But after playing the game for quite some time, I started putting together teams of characters that really reminded me of my favorite Nuzlocke strategies. However, I'm still missing just one. Rosaria. I really want Rosaria.
Yo. All right.
Wait, why? Because
right there, that screenshot. That's all you need. That's why.
Because she reminds me of Frostlass. Frostlass, right? One of my favorite Pokemon.
Yeah, of course.
Ghost types are really important.
Well, funny you mentioned Ghost, because I think we all know that if you were to take Rosaria out on a date, no matter how well it went afterwards, she would just ghost your ass. So, she's that kind of person, that kind of gal.
Today, I want to show you some of my favorite characters in this game.
So I think we're going to take a look at some of the team comps. Now, it depends on if you picked individual characters for a comparison to Pokemon, or if you just picked like a whole comp to compare to maybe like whole team synergy. I think it'd be really interesting, but I mean, individual characters make sense or could make sense as well. But we'll look through, we'll see the team on the side. We'll go through it, a little bit of analysis on that as he goes through a couple floors. Here he's on floor 2, and Kali's level 20. Kind of makes sense if he wants to use Kali as a display character, but we'll see if he puts any higher level characters in for higher level floors. We can have a little bit more to talk about for like strategies on higher level floors than on earlier floors like floor 2.
And how their playstyles relate back to some of the most important Nuzlocke strategies that you should be using in your runs. Additionally, we'll be opening up some wishes to see if we can actually find Rosaria.
The Gamba.
So this is my favorite area in the game, which is...
Okay, yeah, so this makes a lot of sense given the content that I likes to make, how into the weeds he gets in Nuzlocks and strategies and everything like that. Spiral Abyss is the closest thing to endgame content that the game has. For accounts that are like really built, it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to 36 star if they're interested in that. But yeah, the Spiral Abyss is basically the challenge mode of the game, and it's no surprise that that's his favorite part.
Yes. The Spiral Abyss really challenges you in combat in this game. It's different dungeons.
Oh yeah, it looks like he's completed all the way through at least floor 8. I wouldn't be surprised if he tried his hand on 9 through 12. I don't think there's anything on the screen here to suggest how far he's gotten apart from floor 8. So that tells you he has 2 teams of characters leveled up far enough to clear that, which means he's basically good for like the rest of the game. If you can clear through floor 8, then you can do any of the content in the open world. Really, it's not that much of a problem. But yeah, I'm interested to see if he looks into any character builds, because it's clear that he has something going on there.
With different floors that allow you to really express strategy. And I want to show you guys 3 different teams of 4 different characters that I really like and kind of relate them back to some Nuzlocke strategies that we normally use on this channel to kind of introduce them to you and to show you the strategic depth that we can go for here. And
yeah, so when you're team building, there's so much depth that you can go into, depending on if you're using characters that you like, if you're only picking characters that are meta, if you're like a free-to-play account that doesn't really have many characters, or you didn't get really lucky. So team building is a core part of Genshin, and again, I'm looking forward to see what he puts together for this.
So here's going to ask us for a...
Yeah, so at the beginning of each floor or chamber of the Spiral Abyss, you get to pick a buff. Some of the buffs are pretty good, but then they're only effective for that specific chamber, as opposed to buffs that are effective for the entire floor. So this character elemental damage is good for, you know, all 3 chambers of the floor. Usually you just want to pick the ones that are effective for the entire floor. Sometimes restoring health is pretty good. It's like 25% health on all your characters. And there may be some, like if you're having trouble with the floor, you might want to pick effective this chamber. But again, that's all kind of situational. Generally effective this floor the best.
Buff that we can pick, one of 3. Normally here on the first chamber, I'll just pick the one that's effective for the entire floor. And the first character I kind of want to introduce to you guys is Diluc. He's a very slow, very heavy attacker who uses fire moves to punch pretty hard. And I'm very reminded of one of my favorite Nuzlocke Pokemon.
Yeah, so one of the reasons he's doing so well here, especially being level 20 against level 25s, is he has his signature weapon, and he hasn't shown us any weapons or artifacts, like levels or anything like that. So he might do that to get into like specific builds for like artifacts are kind of like moves, or weapons are kind of like items. I'm not sure what he's going to do with it. Yeah, this weapon on Diluc is really good. It basically matches his aesthetic. That's like one of the easiest ways you can tell that it's his signature weapon. Wolf's Gravestone, both its substat and refinement stat boost buff your character's attack. There are a couple 5 stars that the weapon doesn't really, their signature weapon doesn't match up, kind of like Nilou. But basically if they run on the same banner at the same time, or like Nilou runs and then on the weapon banner will be like Nilou's weapon, if that makes sense.
Pokemon to use. Maybe not one of the most popular, but I think it's one of the most underrated, and that's Torkoal. I think Torkoal is exceptionally defensive and just does really, really well playing into different physical attackers. The slow but very powerful moves that Diluc throws out really reminds me of that.
Okay, so one thing that you want to keep in mind when you're playing Diluc is that the infusion on his sword, his claymore after his burst, has a limited time on it. So if you expect enemies to be alive afterward, you want to try to keep them close so you can get the best use out of that pyro infusion. Usually for this kind of scenario, you'd be running Diluc with a pyro damage bonus goblet, and that would get the most use out of that. Because when you're doing normal attacks and your E is still on cooldown, you're not getting any boost from that goblet at all, apart from the substats.
Can buff up his fire attacks here, and yeah, he hits pretty hard. Next up, I really like Yunjin.
Okay, Yunjin is an amazing character, but she's really niche. I got kind of flamed for putting her at the top of my 3.8 character roundup for like pull values. At C0, she buffs normal attacks based on her burst level and current defense stat. At further constellations, she'll boost your attack speed. She'll get like raised defenses when she crystallizes. So she really synergizes well with normal attackers. However, kind of looking at the team that he has here, he doesn't really have any normal attackers unless you're using her burst specifically to support Diluc and his infusion after his burst. Now, I'm not sure if that infusion counts as burst damage or normal attack damage, but that's something to keep in mind. Like Raiden Shogun kind of looks like she's doing normal attacks after her burst. That's actually considered burst damage. One of the problems why she doesn't synergize with a lot of other characters, or as many characters as we want. But Yunjin only buffs normal attacks, not like skills or bursts or anything that's considered skill or burst. But she works really well with characters like Yoimiya or Ayato because you activate their skill and it basically changes what their normal attack does and like increases normal attack damage, but it's still considered normal attacks. She's a niche character. She's pretty cool.
Yunjin is a support character, and support Pokemon are often very underrated in Nuzlocke as well. So what Yunjin can kind of do is she can cast this buff and this shield, and then pass that over to the next character. And it reminds me a lot of using Ledian in Nuzlocke, which is another super underrated Pokemon. They use a lot of
like kind of like baton pass,
yeah, screens to kind of buff up the rest of your team and make sure that the rest of your team is functioning well. So casting those support moves, those buffs, and then switching to your damage dealing character.
Yeah, so buffing up your damage dealers in Genshin is extremely important, just like what he mentioned for Nuzlocke's. Characters like Bennett, Shenhe a little bit, and then characters like Yunjin, like you mentioned. If you're not making use of them, you're losing a lot of utility and a lot of damage there. If you're building up your teams, building up your characters, getting everything leveled, and you're still not happy with your damage output, you probably want to take a look into your team synergy and which buffs you're passing along.
Going to this next chamber, I want to show you guys Layla. We can deal some damage to them, and then we cast this here, and she's just going to fall asleep and kind of take a nap, be shielded, and
yeah, so you see that after all those attacks, her shield's still up, and it's pretty funny that she's sleeping inside the shield because she's actually the second best shielder in the game after Zhongli. I mean, if you look at pure HP absorption for the shields, you can make an argument that Toma's a really good shielder because technically he can be the best in the game, but then you're talking about like shield refreshes and stuff like that, not just pure activate your shield and just leave it there to absorb damage. Again, it gets really picky when you're running numbers and taking into account weapons and artifacts, and if you use a certain reaction, some artifact sets boost your shield strength. It's just a lot to take into account for that. Basically, just with a basic HP build, popping your shield. Layla's the second best shielder in the game. So if you have her and you're fine with having some cryo application on the field, you don't really need Zhongli. If you don't want to have cryo on the field, you'd want a Geo Shielder. You could pick Noelle, but Zhongli would be your best pick there.
Have her abilities deal damage during that. That really reminds me of rest.
Let's see if we can get a good shot of this here.
Toxic strategies.
Yeah, so you got a good picture of her weapon here. That is prototype Rancor. So if you're, if you're not a Genshin nerd and you don't know immediately off the top of your head, the substat on that is physical damage bonus. So Layla's normal attacks, 259 is, 25% or like 20% higher, depending on the level of the weapon, of course, than it would be without that bonus. But like Layla's not known for her, physical damage normal attacks. Since she's mainly a shielder, kind of like maybe a little burst support, cryo application, you'd want to run her on something maybe for a little bit more energy recharge, maybe the weapon with HP, to boost your shields. So this might be a case, and I'm really guilty of this. Whenever you're wanting to just use characters for display, you just like switch weapons around, and sometimes you end up with a Layla with the physical damage bonus weapon. It is what it is. So like, not trying to critique his choice there, but just to let you guys know that a physical damage bonus weapon on Layla probably isn't your best choice there. That actually works pretty well on a physical Kaya. If you want to do like a superconduct team to reduce physical res, you add in a couple other characters. You could use that on Kaching because she's you can build her into a physical damage. But if you choose to go that way, prototype Rancor is the choice. It is a good choice for you there. It's actually one of the only free 4-star weapons that you get. So if that was his highest level weapon, you want to put it on that character. Okay, it's not the end of the world if that's your only choice. But yeah, there's better options for which characters to put that on. So the 2 HP stores that you can use on Layla would be the new Dakian's Assistant or the Kiev Kaishna suit, which is new signature weapon. Mentioned that earlier. Some other possibilities would be Favonius for all of that energy and energy recharge, and also Sacrificial, to get your E up again, and also for energy recharge and more elemental particle generation.
Next up, we have Lynette.
So Lynette is a really, really, really good character. She was added in like update 4.0. You get her for free at like AR 24, 25, or 20 or 25, I forget which. But yeah, so she is the first free Animo character that you're guaranteed to have, apart from the main character. Main characters, in my opinion, main character's not the best anyways, so you always want to be replacing them with another character. Lynette really fills that role really well. Basically, in an Animo character, at least early game, you're looking for some CC, crowd control, you're looking for swirl, you're looking for some repeated elemental application, like burst infusion, stuff like that. And not to give too much away, I'm working on a Lynette video now. She's really, really good. She can take the spot of a bunch of other characters. But yeah, Lynette's a really good choice of a character to build for your team. And she's free. Everybody gets her.
Who reminds me of another defensive strategy that is very effective in nuzlocking, which is substitute strats. So if we use if we use Lynette's Q here, we cast this little puppet that enemies are going to be drawn to, and
yeah. So do you see how quickly that her burst there grabbed Cryo off the hilly turtles? I don't think any other Animo character's burst grabs faster than that. Just like basically immediately, and it doesn't actually have to be pulling an element off of a character or off an application. An elemental attack. So like if you use Raiden Shogun's skill or something, that will suck the electro out of that and immediately put it in the Boggle Cat box. So that's pretty cool. I think like Catalyst characters can also just like attack right into it as well. And you can't do that with another Animo character's burst. The Boggle Cat box also taunts enemies. There's very few taunt characters. Amber, Tighnari, Linny. Taunt itself is an OP, but it can be really useful in a bunch of different situations. Tighnari and Linny are DPS characters. Amber's kind of burst support, but having that kind of synergy between a taunt and a DPS really keeps enemies further away from you, especially when you use a ranged DPS like Tighnari or Linny. Lynette as well, her Boggle Cat box shoots out vivid shots, which deal the elemental damage based on the element that it absorbed. So you can see that she's doing, you see the 2 Animo damage pulses on screen, and then we'll also see some timed cryo damage pulses as well.
And then that pup is going to deal damage over time to them. Very much like you can hide a Pokemon behind a substitute in your Nuzlocke to prevent it from taking damage and deal
absolutely
damage over time back. You can tell I'm not 100% proficient with these abilities, but I'm very excited about the strategies.
Yeah, so you don't have to be completely proficient with all the abilities to have fun and to be a decent player with Genshin Impact with doing a decent amount of damage. It's a lot of reading. I'm not trying to say that to flame him. I find myself learning more from trial and error and actual combat rather than reading all the descriptions and puzzling it out from there. For example, like Kujo Sara, from her burst and her skill, she has basically 3 different like states or buffs that can happen, and they basically have the same name. So it's kind of tough keeping it all straight if you're just reading it and trying to plan out how the rotation works rather than learning from trial and error. I think the best way is kind of to mix of both, but you see most of his characters up until this point have been like level 20, and I mentioned he cleared up to floor 8, so it doesn't seem like he uses these characters in particular. They just kind of fit the analogies that he's using. It's not a problem, but actually brings up a really interesting point. So whenever he's playing in Nuzlocke, it's very much, you know, you want to avoid the snowball. You want to avoid kind of losing or sacking one important Pokemon and one-time use items and all that sort of thing. You want to use them, like get the most value out of them possible. And you don't want to waste it. You kind of waste not mentality there. But you can kind of see it coming over to this account for Genshin Impact. A lot of players waste resources by leveling up all their characters in case they want to use them. As soon as they get Lynette, they want to level her up, you know. And once they're all leveled up, they just, you know, sit in the back and collect dust. But we see from the Spiral Abyss that on this account, a lot of his characters aren't leveled past 20. You actually get an initial standard banner wish there so that you get some value of leveling them up to 20 without actually using them. It's really good, shows some planning and self-control. I went through kind of a phase where I was leveling up a lot of characters, but for me it was like a content thing. I want to be able to use them and I want to have them leveled up. If like a new character releases and they work really well with Lynette, I don't want my Lynette sitting at level 20.
So the first character I want to show you guys on this floor is Tignari.
Alright, so taking a look at the team that he has Tighnari, Kali, Chi-Chi, and Lisa. For this chamber specifically, they're not going to do too much work there. Lisa can't really do much at all because she's Electro Catalyst versus Electro Slime's immune to electro damage. Chi-Chi, fine for healing, does some superconduct, but you're not really doing, you know, this team is not built around physical damage. Kali and Tighnari, that quicken into the spread reaction. That's where most of your damage for this will be coming from then. Since this is such an early floor, you're not really building teams to take care of the whole floor. You can basically build a couple characters that can take care of each chamber. And I think if he shows this team on, I think like chamber 2, we'll see a bit more synergy on that.
You can cast his E, and if you stand in this field,
yeah, so that E taunts, so enemies are drawn there. So you kind of want to be staying away from it. He mentioned if you stand on the field,
it charges a lot faster.
Yeah, so just little point of accuracy here. You don't have to be standing in the field to get the charging faster. And kind of the best way to play Tighnari is back from enemies, unless you're using specific weapons like Rust. But at that point, you're just doing normal attacks, and that doesn't quite apply here. Yeah, so you wouldn't want to be standing right up next to enemies here. You want to be sticking away from them, let that taunt work. So with Electro enemies, in this case, you get that initial Dendro application onto them to quicken, and then you get Tighnari's spread damage. So that can actually really buff up his attack without having to, you know, hit multiple times to get all the way to spread.
And another grass user I kind of want to show you is Kale.
Yo, it's Kali with the Glark.
New kitchen gun!
Kale is also an archer, but Kale also has this boomerang, which deals damage on the way through and on the way back. And this is maybe a bit of a stretch. I just really like this character, but
yeah, Kali's another free character, not the best. If you like Kali, absolutely use her. She's definitely viable. She can be used in some really good early game Hyper Bloom teams, but her basic Dendro application kind of falls off as soon as you get another Dendro character, especially like a 5-star like Nahida. If you get like a free character from Lantern Right like Yao Yao, again, Yao would pretty quickly replace Kali there. If you're just looking at pure, you know, meta DPS viability.
So this is Chi-Chi.
Oh no, oh, Chi-Chi. It's fine to make a comparison from Chi-Chi to Pokemon, but like, there's a reason that, you know, I pulled the Chi-Chi was a meme in the community. For the longest time, Chi-Chi was the worst 5-star on the standard banner, or was considered to be the worst. Now, you know, fighting with Dia for that bottom place. Every character has their usefulness, has their utility. Her healing is pretty good. Based on her attacks, she can do a little bit more damage while she's, you know, doing on-field healing.
And Chi-Chi's E is a little sprite that spawns. You see a little ball around me, and this periodically heals you.
Yeah, so I mentioned Chi-Chi's an on-field healer. She also has off-field healer capabilities as well. Chi-Chi's burst and then normal attacks heal up your team. Chi-Chi's skill has a little ball that goes around your character, applying cryo, and then also healing your on-field character. So that's how she works her utility as an off-field healer as well.
Now, the interesting part about that is if you switch to another character, the sprite will stay and it will keep healing you. And that reminds me of using wish strats in Nuzlocke, which is another pretty effective way of healing your characters, healing your Pokemon. And then the next character I want to show you is Lisa here.
Yeah, so Lisa, basically the only early game Electro character you can use. Taking a look at this team again, let me see if I can get a good picture here. Here we go. So Tighnari, Kali, Chi-Chi, and Lisa. Like I mentioned before, he is showing floor 2, chamber 2, which is all Hydro enemies or enemies that are affected by Hydro because of the water on the floor, you see that his team is affected by Hydro, his on-field character. So there's Hydro everywhere, right? And if you look at his team, the only thing that he's missing from having a really nice Hyper Bloom comp is Hydro application. He had characters that could really easily clear Chamber 1, and now as a team, he can really easily clear Chamber 2. So taking a look through it, you'd be able to Bloom with Tighnari Kali on these Hydro affected enemies, and then Lisa would be able to Hyper Bloom using her skill, burst, normal attacks. Again, not the most consistent Hyper Bloomer because you can't necessarily predict where the electro is going to be applied. Catalyst characters are really bad with aim assist or auto aiming. The really interesting thing here is Chi-Chi. Now, again, I'm not sure if he specifically put this team together, but Chi-Chi changes this from a Hyper Bloom team into what we call a Fridge team. Hyper Bloom works fine. You're Hyper Blooming off of those Dendro cores, but you're kind of limited by how many cores you can create. Cryo actually allows you to create more cores by having 2 auras on an enemy that won't interact with each other. It doesn't work with these slimes, but it will work with, I think there's like an Abyss Mage and maybe like a Mitoturl on this floor as well. You can have Dendro and Cryo auras on the enemy at the same time since those 2 elements don't react. So then you're basically talking about elemental gauge theory and elemental application units. It's a little bit too niche for the video here, but I did cover this at the end of my first 5 tips video. It's actually really interesting, so you can deal a little bit more damage with your Hyper Bloom teams that way.
Normal attack. If you manage to charge it and actually hit it, it does quite a bit more damage. However, if you get hit while charging it, you will be interrupted, which is...
Yeah, so damage interruption is one of the biggest things that you need to worry about at higher levels of Genshin Impact, because you want to keep your DPS churning out, right? And any time that your character's being like CC'd or juggled, you're losing damage. You're losing DPS. One of the best ways to mitigate this is to bring a shielder. It's an easy solution there.
We can go back to Chi-Chi here and cast her ability as well, cast her ultimate as well, which is going to freeze a lot. And now we can go back to Lisa, charge up big and hit a big hit, cast some more AoE here. Really nice combo there. You can think of it kind of like a bulky attacker, and Nuzlocke being supported by a defensive wish Pokemon like Togetic or something.
Yeah, so you're in Genshin when you're team building, you're really working, pick some matchups. Like he used Chi-Chi to freeze everybody because Lisa's, interruption was a problem. That's a really good way of, not using a shielder and getting around, the same obstacle. It's just like Pokemon, there's multiple ways to pivot and navigate around, using freeze and then having your kind of squishy character on the field while the enemies are frozen. It's another good way to work around it.
So first off, we have Hazo here, who has some of the most satisfying animations.
Okay, Hazo is, or was for the longest time, my favorite character in the game. I sniped him off his banner pretty early as soon as he was introduced. So he was my DPS. I had a couple like elemental supports with him. So I was doing some swirl, doing some animo damage. Not the best way to use him, but it got me from probably AR 20 or so all the way up to 45 or closer to 50 before I started swapping out for like actual DPS and fully built characters. This chamber specifically, I think we'll see him suffer a bit because I don't think you can see him now, but there's Hilichurl shooters that kind of stand around the outside. So if you stay on the inside and you're focused on those enemies, you're really going to be taking a lot of damage and you have to worry about interruption while you're dealing with all of them. Hazo, not the best against slimes because he's just doing animo damage, no swirl because they're immune to it all. But here you see the Hilichurl's, the club is already burning. I think the other one's a shielder. Can't really tell from this picture, but yeah, swirling from melee pyro enemies onto Hilichurls with shields or weapons. It's a really good strategy. Looking at the team that he has on this floor here, Yanfei is an on-field DPS. Sayu's a off-field healer. Hazo kind of on-field DPS as well. And Xinyan is a shielder and burst support. This team's it's not actually a bad team to put together. If you're short on characters, you can build Sayu maybe with the Noblesse artifact set to boost everybody's damage if she uses her burst to heal. You can put Hazo on 4-piece Viridescent to reduce pyro resistance. You have a shielder, you have a healer, you have DPS. It's basically all you need. Only enemies you're going to struggle against would be pyro slimes. It's funny that it's on this floor, but yeah, you could definitely do some work, put in some work with this team.
Maybe my favorite in the entire game. He does a bit of air bending. He does a bit of air damage. And
yeah, so Hazo, I love how much he's an airbender. Oh, and I think I missed talking about this earlier. He's a really good like airbender, type of character. If you actually put him on a team with Toma, give him some shields, with Toma's burst, get those coordinated attacks. It's Firebender Hazo. It's an amazing kind of meme build. but it's actually pretty good against, you know, non-pyro slime enemies or non-pyro shielded enemies. One reason that Hazo feels so good is because of kind of like a mechanic that they use with a lot of animo characters. They want the animo characters to kind of stun lock. A lot of it is burst or skill. With Hazo, his burst and skill are focused around damage. His burst kind of knocks up enemies a little bit, knocks them into the air. But most of his crowd control and his stun lock comes from his normal attacks. And yet that's another reason why, you know, this chamber might not be the best for him, because he's able to, you know, CC or stun lock all the characters in a melee distance around him, but not the Heliotroph shooters on the outside. So while you're taking care of everybody on the inside, you're still getting that interruption from the shooters on the outside.
Another character I really want to show you is Sayu.
Yeah, so Sayu, amazing voice actress, Lily Pichu, content creator. Love the character. Love the personality she puts into it. So Sayu's hold E ability, she rolls into a ball, and it's actually a really good exploration ability. So that's another thing that makes this team a little bit better. It has, you know, some level of everything that you want. Healer, shielder, DPS, exploration, utility. She can swirl with her hold E, but then she also can infuse with a certain element. So if you hold E, go by a pyro slime, you can apply pyro to enemies around you.
And she also has a very, very fun, very satisfying ability to hit, and that's her E here. She rolls and dashes forward. She can combo that. She can chain that into another one. Boom. Just like you would in Pokemon using rollout.
He's not using the held version of it, but in this situation specifically, when you have Heliotrophs with shields and they're soaking up the damage instead of actually, you know, dealing damage to their health bar, you would be wanting to use that, grab the pyro from the slime, and then put that on their shields to burn through the shields, literally, and then do your damage from like normal attacks, or even spam your E again.
Next character I want to show you guys is Yanfei.
Yeah, so Yanfei is a pretty good pyro DPS character. Catalyst, so you run into inherent problems with aim assist. Well, actually, I want to see if he runs into any here.
So Yanfei is an interesting range character. As you can see, if I use my ranged attacks here like this.
Yeah, so you see
you can see
he might just be going to say it. Yeah, you see the stacks behind her. Those are kind of like buffs to her charge attack. So you see he has 4. So that would make her charge attack as powerful as it could be, or the most powerful it could be. I think the meta pick there is to just get up to 3 stacks and then use her charge attack. I think if you get up to the 4, the damage that you get versus the time it takes to get up to that point might just, I'm pretty sure that's a DPS loss over time. But yeah, for you and your teams, if you use Yanfei, probably just want to do 3 stacks and charge attack.
My abilities also instantly stack up my charges.
Yeah, you see how, you know, he was taking some damage there. Looks like he got down to a certain % of health, and you see that kind of angular shield around her. So that is, I believe, Yanfei's C4. I think that's her 4th constellation. So she actually shields herself after a certain amount of damage taken, so that really, you know, helps into her utility and her viability to stay on field, you know, taking some damage. That build we lovingly call Tankfei. It's actually really good, kind of a niche off-meta build.
You can combo it like that because you can perpetually stun them with these built-up attacks. And probably the most powerful strat in any Nuzlocke is going to be setup strats. Using Swords Dance, using Calm Mind, using Bulk Up.
Yep, we already covered it. Setting up in Genshin Impact, very important. Passing buffs from one character to another. On this team, I don't think there are very many buffs that can be passed along. Sayu's Noblesse buff, if she has that, of course. If Hazo has Viridis and Venerer to reduce pyro shields or pyro resistance. Having Yanfei and Xinyan, 2 pyro characters on the same team, gives you pyro resonance, which increases everyone's attack by 25%. But yeah, apart from that, there doesn't seem to be too much buff stacking or buff passing.
Setting up your stats, taking some extra turns, dealing a little bit less damage or no damage at all in the case of Pokemon. Maybe there's even Charge Beam strats to then deal some powerful blows right after. As you can see, we can just kind of, with these charge up moves, chain stun them. Now I'm out of stacks, so we got to stack up again, and I'm running very low on health. So I guess it's time to show you the next character, which is Xinyan. Regardless, for us Nuzlocke veterans, it is one of the most reliable things you can do, especially in double battles, and that's going to be explosion strats. And I mean, while this explosion doesn't take out Xinyan herself, you do have to do the positioning correctly and use it at the right time, so you can deal a massive.
Okay, so that's that bit rate absolutely sucks.
Bomb like this.
So, kind of the first time where I paused with the the crazy low bit rate. You know, side note: Genshin Impact bit rates. Genshin Impact kills bit rates with all the animations and stuff on that. Thing to keep in mind if you're like streaming or recording it, but. With that burst, I don't think we saw any physical damage.
Explosion doesn't take out Xinyan herself. You do have to do the positioning correctly and use it at the right time. So you can deal.
Yeah, so we see that there's nobody like really directly around her. I actually made a video about Xinyan and her burst with her spec into physical DPS, physical damage. So we see here that the damage that she deals is, you see a vaporize, you see a pyro number. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like anybody was close enough. That's when you'd want to use like a CC character like Venti or Sucrose or like a taunt or something like that to get all the enemies closer together. My Xinyan hit 20k physical from her burst at level 60. It's really, really good. I mean, it's basically what you need at the highest world level. You just build up from there because my Xinyan wasn't completely built. But yeah, he mentions positioning. And unfortunately, this is a good example of, how you don't want to position Xinyan. You don't want to have the enemies out in the ring, like where the pyro is coming out, because they're going to get hit by the pyro anyway. You want them a little bit closer in to get hit by the physical.
A massive AoE bomb like this, it just does so much damage all in a circle, and it's a great finisher move.
Another thing that we see here, you see the shield around his on-field character. That's from Xinyan's skill. And then you see the kind of like sound forms around. That means that he triggered one of her passives. I believe it's a passive. Whenever you use your skill with, I think it's 3 or more enemies within, a certain range of her, it does, pulses of pyro AoE damage. I think maybe one of her constellations reduces that to like 2 or more in a certain area. The issue with that is it doesn't trigger reliably. So you can meet the requirements, but it doesn't trigger. It's really inconsistent in basically like the same situation.
It also puts the tempo in your favor because you get a free switch to a Pokemon of your choice.
There's nothing like hearing that spacebar spam when you get frozen. You know that this just paid for everybody.
And that's why sacrificing Pokemon in Nuzlocke is so powerful, and it's such a good thing to keep in mind, especially for late game fights. But
so there's 2 things. You see him jumping around. It looks like he's trying to avoid damage. He might be doing it just to move around a little bit easier. If he finds that easier, that's totally fine. But there's 2 things that we can talk about with the Claymore character jumping. One is just kind of like when any character is jumping. If he's using it to dodge, okay, this really gets into like nerd shit here. It actually would be better to dash if he's just trying to avoid attacks, because whenever you dash, you get invulnerability frames or iframes about 40 milliseconds after you hit the dodge button, and it lasts for 300 milliseconds in total. You basically time it perfectly. You can get those iframes to dodge and not take damage. Like whenever like a big enemy, they're winding up for an attack, you see it coming, you dodge, they swing, you don't take damage. That's the way that you can use iframes on any character. Iframes are also in 5-star character bursts. So whenever the camera kind of goes around for like Yelan, whenever she's using her burst, or Jean, or like any 5-star character, you get iframes during that animation. Usually 4-star characters, there's not like a camera zoom in, there's no iframes. One of the theories is that Barbara was supposed to be a 5-star character, because I'm pretty sure she's the only 4-star that has iframes and has like a camera movement during her burst. A little bit of a conspiracy theory there. But back to dashing versus jumping. Jumping only gives iframes to the second, the bottom half of your character. So, with projectiles coming in, especially if they aim at you while you're jumping, if they hit the top half of your character, you can actually get juggled in the air. Not the best tactic for dodging. If it works for you, keep using it. I'm not going to be too picky about how you play your game, because obviously doesn't matter to me, but I just want to give you that tidbit there. The other half of it is there's a little kind of niche ability with Claymore characters, and something that I don't know if he was actually trying to do it here, because he has double animo. If you have like 2 animo characters or like an attack speed boost of some kind, actually it's a movement speed boost, you can try dragon striking. So the moment that you hit an enemy, kind of like glitches and the weapon pauses for like a fraction of a second. If you jump and dash as the weapon kind of takes its pause, you can transfer that momentum from horizontal to vertical. So you go up far enough that you can do a plunging attack. The damage scaling percentages on plunging attack are quite a bit higher than normal attacks. So D-Luke Dragon Strike is a thing. Usually it's taller Claymore characters, usually the male Claymore characters that can Dragon Strike better. So like D-Luke better than Xinyan, just because of how the physics engine in the game works. So Dragon Striking is another thing that you can try to use around here. The higher movement speed you have, the better it would work. So if you have like a character that raises your movement speed during certain times of the day, you have 2 animo characters, all these different things allow you to Dragon Strike a little bit better. You can try to Dragon Strike with any kind of like melee weapon, sword, polearm, claymore, but the kind of hit delay with swords and polearms is a little bit too short to actually Dragon Strike. That's why it's just like a claymore thing. I covered this in a previous video. I think it was one of my 5 tips videos, so go check that out if you want more information. But that's the end of the video. That's all I got. If you like Pokemon and Nuzlocke content, go make sure to check Pokemon Challenges out. He makes a lot of content with Nuzlocks, pretty technical, really planned out and methodical. If you like Pokemon and some of my more technical videos, absolutely give him a sub, check him out. I still got YouTube outros, so hit that like button, subscribe so you get notified if I post again. So bye, see ya, adios, so long, bye, bye-bye. Catch you later. Have a good one. Bye. Why are you still here? See you later. Bye-bye.